Okay, hello everyone. It's me, the Profesor, and as you can clearly see, for this video, and this is going to be the fourth installment of videos covering the Daughter of Fortune story. I seem to be in weird places every time I make these videos, or something crazy seems to happen. But yeah, I'm actually recording here. This is the travel agent La Mesa. I'm in town for a couple of days to take care of some matters at both Grossmont and also at Mesa College too. So instead of going back and forth, I figure I just link everything for a span of about a couple of days, and then I'll head back up the 15 after that. So in this video, I want to go ahead and talk a little bit more about what's happening in chapters 11 through 14 of the story, and these are the events taking shape roughly around 1847 into 1849. So this is getting into the period in which the gold rush is really about to take shape in 1849. The news, of course, with gold had started to send shockwaves in not just the United States, but the rest of the world in the middle parts of in the mid to the fall of 1848. And as you recall from my character video, I made reference to that in the official dispatch from the commander, from Colonel Mason to President Polk in 1848. Essentially, once that news reached President Polk, and President Polk announced it to the nation, then you might say all hell broke loose. By the summer into the fall of 1848, some of the earlier ones were trying to get over to California, for the most part going by going by boats, because because traveling overland across the country during the winter wasn't exactly, shall we say, let's put it, they didn't have the interstate highway system back in those days. But once spring of 1849 happened, then it was as the late great J.S. Holiday, a California historian, pointed out, all the world rushed in, and those are some of the events that are going to be taking shape in the Daughter Fortune readings. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll say a few things about what's happening in the Who Built America readings. Take a look at a little bit more about American politics leading up to the mid 1840s. So some of the topics that's covered in the recent readings, which and let me just check on my book here, chapter 8. I'll say a few things about that. So I'll do things a little bit reverse, because in the first three videos I talked about U.S. stuff before, and then went to the Daughter Fortune. I'll flip it over, so I'll talk about the events happening in chapters 11 through 14, and then I'll say a few things about the United States. But first, a couple of one quick housekeeping item with respect to the forums, and with respect to the group activity. Again, the dates that I have listed, and keep in mind, I'm changing all the dates to Sundays. I know some of the forums still have dates on Fridays, but don't pay attention to that. Whatever I say in the videos and the announcements, that supersedes everything, whether it's listed in the assignment section, in the syllabus, or in this case the forum. So Sundays, those are the due dates now for your original comments. So whatever question you choose, in consultation with your group leader, whatever question you choose, Sunday, then that's the due date in which I want your original comments about your question. But as for the 5 total comments per the forum, you can reply anytime after that. And I had a really good question. In fact, Julie was the one who sent the question. About when is the final drop dead due date in terms of all the comments, and she mentioned Thanksgiving, so we're going to go ahead and go with that. So I haven't formalized that, but let's go ahead with the very end, the last week of November. So right before we get into the finals period into December, that'll be the final due date in which everything on Daughter Fortune, that is your replies to others within your group, and of course to me as well. That's when I want all of your comments to. That makes up the 5 total comments per the forum. So again, just to recap, the 5 comments total means it combines your original comments, the original reply to the question that you choose, and then after that, and then on top of that, that's your replies, your at least 4 replies to others within your group, or to meet me as well. So that totality then is the 5 total comments that I want. But again, the due dates refer to when I want your original comments to the questions that you choose for that week in that specific form. So again, Sundays then are the due dates for those um, comments. And unfortunately, the lighting here is a little bit funky right now, so there we go. So I'll just keep moving back and forth until you guys can see me. I'm using the photo booth on my MacBook, so we'll try that and see if that maybe improves the quality on some of the previous videos. Okay, without further ado, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the Daughter of Fortune stuff. Let me say a few quick things about what's happening in chapters 11 through 14, and then I'll talk about the U.S. stuff. Okay, chapter 11 is the chapter called Dao Jian. Try saying that 10 times fast. And in the Dao Jian chapter, here we see Dao moving on to Hong Kong to start a new life and to find a wife. But it seems that Dao, even though he has a penchant for numbers, he seems to love gambling. So that appears to be one of his main vices that will be with him for the rest of the story. But Dao was also cognizant about the politics at the time, and he knew that the British, they were the major players, the men behind the plan, the guys running the show, so to speak. This is common. This was touched upon a little bit in the previous chapter in chapter 10, and Dao, even though he, you might say, fears the British, he's also enchanted by them. He's interested by them, and this is encapsulated by his working relationship with the mysterious Dr. Ebenezer Hobbs. So that's one interesting character who emerges. We don't see too much about Dr. Hobbs, but he's one character who you might say exemplifies a British know-how, British techniques, medicine, science, philosophy, things of this nature. Okay. As I mentioned, Dao looks for a wife and he meets a wife, but unfortunately his happiness is short-lived. Very tragic circumstances unfolding there. So I won't go into a lot of the details of what happens with Dao's wife, but you might say her afterlife. That is after when she passes away, that her ghost becomes more important, as we'll see as the story unfolds. Dao really goes into a tailspin. One thing leads to another, and to make a long story short, here's Dao ultimately ends up in the company of of sailors. He ends up in Chile. He ends up with Captain John Summers, and then Dao decides to go on to work with Captain Vincent Katz. I mentioned Vincent Katz in the in my character video. So basically, what I did in the character video was that I sort of took Vincent Katz and hired him to be my character's partner in crime, so to speak. So we'll meet more about Captain Katz's character in both chapter 11 and on into chapter 12. So in other words, how Dao goes from China to Chile, that's the main focus of chapter 11. In chapter 12, that's the main voyage. This is where we get the migration story in which Eliza decides to go look for her lover Joaquin in California, and the voyage, of course, the chapter is about the voyage itself, all the pitfalls, the trials and tribulations, the difficulty that Eliza has during this time, but then she puts her confidence in Dao. So this chapter then begins the unlikely pairing, the unlikely friendship between Dao and Eliza, which of course would be a centerpiece of the story. You might say maybe the moral center of the story as we get further and further toward the conclusion of the story itself. Okay. We get to see a little bit of some of the other people who are on the ship as they're making their way from Chile to California. We see who some of the people are. We also see a little bit of differences with respect to classes, gender differences, things of this nature. And then when they get to California, when they get to San Francisco, they come across Feliciano Rodriguez, who of course is Paulina's husband. Feliciano, this really interesting thing about Daughter Fortune, the idea of reinventing oneself, and We see that time and time again, and you might say, Feliciano, he does that too, but now he calls himself Felix Cross, and he looks like a rugged mountain man, sort of like the Jedediah Smith, Grizzly Adams, a type of character. Kind of dating myself right there. Grizzly Adams was a popular show back in the 1970s. A guy lived in the mountains, and his friends were these were the animals, a big giant bear, the eagles, all of that. So in a sense, Feliciano kind of comes across as a big rugged mountain man. But again, the idea of reinventing oneself, that theme we see evident already. And he makes an interesting observation. He talks about how the law of the jungle rules. The only ideology is greed. Really important point to keep in mind. And I know I touch upon some of this in the chapter 12 questions. So those of you in group 3, you'll be working on that particular aspect in your forums. Okay. In chapter 13. And again, we're talking about April of 1849. So early spring of 1849, here is where Eliza, Dow, and the others make their way into California. Just as the gold rush is really starting to get going at this point in time. In this chapter, a lot of description here. Allende talks a lot about the different communities, the different people, the Asians, the South Americans, the Mexicans, the Chileans, and their camp. That is what they're looking for. And then, but because Eliza wants to go look for Joaquin, they don't stay in San Francisco long. They go up towards Sacramento. So both of them make their way up towards Sacramento. Allende describes the journey. She talks about going from San Francisco Bay, San Pablo Bay, Siusin Bay. So all of you who are from the Bay Area or know the Bay Area very well, you know all about all those little bays, those smaller bays north of San Francisco Bay as you head out toward Sacramento, Stockton, Vallejo, Benicia, Martinez, all of those towns. Allende gives a really good depiction of what that's all about. Let's see what else I should mention here. Allende also talks a little bit about some of the early businesses, the industries, the types of things that people are getting involved in, the various enterprises, the types of things that Paulina Rodriguez is more interested in compared to looking for gold. And let's see what else I should mention here. And then also stories about violence too, because as more and more people come into the area, conflicts begin to emerge between the Anglo-American miners and the Mexican miners and the Native American populations. So the troubles facing the Native American populations, that becomes a focus of the chapter. So again, that gets a little bit of a description about that, and the emergence of the Chinese gangs, the Tongs. The Tongs then are the ones who you might say provide the protection for a lot of the Chinese merchants and Chinese miners, because of course nobody else in California wants to look out for the Chinese. In fact, if anything, the myth of Joaquin Murrieta, the famous Mexican bandido at that time, and that'll be a focus of the story as we begin to see where the Joaquin Andieta, he might be the Joaquin Murrieta, the legendary bandido. So my point is, a lot of the Mexicans, maybe the Mexican bandits, they didn't like the Chinese either. They're in the story of Joaquin Murrieta, there's a lot of stories that his right-hand man, Three Finger Jack, he was really nasty toward the Chinese, mutilated them, really nasty stuff. He doesn't get into that, but the Juan Murrieta story, which was written in the 1850s, talks a lot about the brutality that Three Finger Jack imposed upon the Chinese miners. So my point is, for the Chinese, they had to look to themselves, and the Tongs, the gangs, they were among the ones who sort of like the mafia or the Irish gangs of New York in the turn of the century in the United States. The Tongs, you might say, served that same purpose for the Chinese. Okay, let's see what else. Okay, and let's go ahead and finish off with chapter 14. And chapter 14, here is where the Summers family finally realizes that Eliza is missing. It had taken a week before they finally realized that she was gone. So of course that sends the family into a tailspin. They don't know what to do. Jeremy is saying this, John is saying doing that, Rose is this, blah blah blah. But the upshot is we hear the very important secret that Rose has been hiding for all these years about Eliza. So I'm not going to reveal the secret here. You'll find out what that secret is as you read chapter 14. In the meantime, Eliza is still moving her way, looking for Joaquin. She comes across various camps. She comes across a camp of Chileans, and interestingly, and I think this is part of Allende's mastery too. Through Eliza, Allende pokes fun at the class system, the class structure that the Chileans, some of the upper class Chileans, tried to impose when they came to California. Basically, it was as if they were trying to impose their old patron system. That is, you have the upper class guy, the patron, the big boss man, the head honcho, mayordomo, whatever you want to call him, and he's got his workers, his peons. They do this, and they see patron, whatever you say, patron, you know everything, patron, blah blah blah. In essence, Allende pokes fun at that. In chapter 14. In fact, Allende, through Eliza, calls these upper class Chileans upper class dandies, and of course, dandy is sort of a derisive term for an upper class guy, whether it was from England, from Chile, from the U.S. You get the idea. Definitely criticism of class structure, and finally, Eliza comes across a Mormon merchant. The Mormons were among the ones who really, you might say, helped to shake and move and push the global agenda, especially with the legacy of the Mormon elder Sam Brannan. So when Eliza comes across a Mormon store owner and talks about if he had seen someone who matched Joaquin's description, Eliza gets a really big piece of news. She says that's the one. So I'll go ahead and stop it there. So obviously everyone's in California now. Eliza is on the march trying to find Joaquin, and that's where chapter 14 leaves off. And in the next few chapters, we get into 1850. California becomes a state, and then things really begin to accelerate in terms of politics, society, and of course, Eliza, as she begins to further and further grow as a young enterprising woman. In fact, and in fact, continue with the theme of reinventing oneself. So that's coming up for the next video. Okay, let me go ahead now for these next few minutes and say a few things about what's happening in the United States, and this is in conjunction with chapter. Let me just get my book here and double check. Okay, on chapter 8 in the Global America text, and let me just open up a couple of pages here, and I'll quickly recap some of the main points of chapter 8 and how they tie in with the Daughter of Fortune items that I mentioned. Chapter 8 gets into the idea of immigration, urban life, and social reform in the free labor North. So the readings take us from what's happened in 1838 up to roughly the end of the 1850s, going into 1860, just before the U.S. Civil War. But clearly, the main points that are relevant here from the chapter is that the United States is a growing country. We're seeing all kinds of advances in all kinds of technologies, growth in canals, roads, and of course, eventually things such as the railroads, telegraph, other types of infrastructure. And these would be things that would be really important when the U.S. goes to war with Mexico in 1848. The U.S. had an advantage in terms of a lot of these technologies that Mexico didn't have, and these things proved to be a key difference. Newspapers, propaganda, all of that stuff, which we get into a little bit more coming up in the next week's video. So there's more rapid communications between the eastern part of the U.S., especially the northeast toward the west. Places like Michigan, those places had been states. Detroit had been a city for about. A booming city for about 2 or 3 decades at this point in time. So clearly, there's a sense that in Chapter 9 we're getting more of a sense that the United States is a go-ahead nation, but also too we're seeing more and more influx in terms of immigration, Irish, Germans, and here of course we see the events happening in Europe, like the Irish potato famine, which the blight, which turned the potatoes into black, ugly, gloppy, yucky, gooey messes. And then in Germany, we're seeing advances. We're seeing the consolidation of German states. So that's driving a lot of people out too. And then getting back to Ireland, the fact that the English, of course, with English property owners, they were pushing the Irish out of their lands too. So we're seeing a combination in both the United States and Europe in what's called push-pull factors. By push, we're talking about whether it's a famine, whether it's a civil war, ethnic strife, religious conflict, things which push people out of a country into a country which has pull factors. And we're talking about things such as access to land, advances in technologies, that is more opportunity for work, better wages, better living conditions, freedom to worship freely, these types of things. So things in U.S. are pulling people from Europe like a magnet, much like the U.S. had done in the 1920s with respect to the Mexicans when they left Mexico during the Revolutionary period in the 1910s and into the early parts of the 1920s. That's what's happening here in the United States in the 1840s and into the 1850s. So when you have these types of situations happening here, competition for jobs in places like, say, New York, Philadelphia, Boston, that is, people who had been in these areas for many years, they're now competing with not only Irish and Germans but also African Americans. Obviously, it's going to cause some conflict and hardship. Stories of riots breaking out, which chapter 8 covers, but because of things such as depressed wages, loss of jobs, not surprisingly, for those people who had been in Pennsylvania or New York, Boston, they don't have many more opportunities. They want to go west. So not surprisingly, at the combination of these Europeans coming into the United States around the 1830s and into the 1840s, this, not surprisingly, compels many Americans that, well, it's getting too yucky here. It's getting too crowded. It's messy. It's dirty. Stories about crime and poverty, prostitution, gangs, all of that stuff, which is also covered also in chapter 8. This is going to compel people to maybe think, let's get the hell out of here. This place is yucky. Let's go west. So not surprisingly, when news of the gold rush hits in 1848 into 1849, and you're having problems back home in, say, Detroit, Philadelphia, Boston, New Haven, and in toward the south, like Charleston or wherever, not surprisingly, maybe you got a new life in California, so you might want to go there in the 1840s. So this is definitely one thing to consider as more social problems arise in the larger cities, more of an immigrant population. Put these things together, and going to California might not be such a bad idea. Okay, let me see what other items I should mention too. So I mentioned immigration, so a lot more coverage about the Irish and Germans coming in, their enterprises, their industries that they get involved in. A rise of political parties too, the third parties like the Liberty Party and the Free Soil Party. So anti-slavery, abolition movement, these things really start to accelerate, and women's movements too, with the Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls. So women starting to agitate more for political rights. That is the same types of rights that Jefferson talked about in the Declaration of Independence. These types of things, people like Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and others. These are described in chapter 8 as well. And let's see what else I should mention here. Oh, religious groups, utopian communities. So again, from the religious perspective, the thinking too is that if you feel that there's too much sin and too much urban decay, moral turpitude, whatever going on in your part of the country, then maybe going west to spread the good word, to start utopian communities, going into California, and maybe going further on toward the west into Hawaii. The Hawaiian Islands are back known as the Sandwich Islands. That's another thing which might compel you to want to go west as well. And let me see what else I should mention here. Okay, there's a little bit at the end of the chapter about James Polk and the U.S.-Mexico War, but I'll save more about the discussion most likely in next week's video. But again, the point in chapter 8, and to tie in with Daughter of Fortune, is the fact that as the U.S. is modernizing and changing, there's more of an influx of new peoples coming from other parts of the world, and you've got these new technologies and these new ideas of trying to start a new utopian community that is it's really yucky here. It's messy. We have to go west. We have to spread the good word. We have to teach the heathens, the savage barbarian Indians and the heathens in Hawaii, those types of places. Basically, what's happening here is that we're seeing in the United States in the 1830s and into the into the very early parts of the 1840s, the more and more of an impulse of manifest destiny. And Chapter 8 does a great job of tying all those factors together. So when you have that impulse going on, not surprisingly, it's going to want to convince you that if you don't like the life where you are now because of economic matters, you can't find jobs, you have to compete with Irish and African Americans for jobs in Boston, in New York, in Philadelphia, New Haven, Providence, all of those places. You want a new chance of life, and maybe California might be the way to go. So not surprisingly, when news of the gold rush hits in 1848 and more so into 1849, many Americans had this idea that maybe if they went west, this would solve all their problems. And with the new technologies and newspapers spreading stories about gold in the American River, blah blah blah, that type of thing. Kind of comparable to the way my character Alexander Gustro Green was talking about. Not surprisingly, many Americans are going to be receptive to this notion, and going to California might seem like a pretty good idea. So we'll touch more upon all this. All of these aspects in the next two videos. So I hope this video covered a lot of the main points in the Daughter Fortune Who Built America readings and how they tie together. So we'll continue on with these themes for the next for two more videos, and most likely the next video it'll be in another hotel room, whether it'll be in Ontario at the Sheraton before my flight, or might even be in Detroit too. So just stay tuned for next week. Let's see where El Profesor ends up for the next video. All right, everyone. So that's it from here. You guys take care. And next week, of course, besides the video on part 5 on the 5th installment, I'll also have the video on how to post your character videos into the class. Okay, that's it from here, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.